Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to why nobody lives in upstate New York. And I mean, New York is a state, I don't know much about it, to be honest. It's probably one of the states that I know about least. Mainly because obviously New York City is a city that I know about a lot, and I feel like it's probably the most well-known city in the world. But then New York as a state, most people probably just associate with the city. But I feel like in northern New York, is Buffalo northern New York? I don't know if it's northern New York. I know it's in New York. I think it might be northern, but I'm just going to assume, obviously, New York is a state. I feel like it gets cold throughout the state. Just obviously, the more northern you go in the winter, I guess it gets very cold. Maybe that's a factor into it, but we're going to check this out. Hopefully, going to enjoy. Links are in the description to my Patreon, where you can see reactions that I can't post to YouTube. But let's check this out and see why nobody lives in upstate New York.
New York is home to about 19.5 million people, making it the fourth largest state in the United States. But despite its size, about 62% of the state's entire population exists on just 4% of its land in the far southeast corner, also known as New York City. This has left the rest of New York feeling pretty empty. So why don't more people live in upstate New York?
Let's see. Oh, they've changed the
Welcome to Geography
intro
by Jeff. New York is one of the most interesting states in the country. No other state is as dominated by a single state in the same way that New York is, though perhaps Illinois comes close with Chicago. Still, this has led to the otherwise really large state of New York feeling rather empty when you travel even a little farther north than the city. And as usual, there's a geographic reason for this. But first, be sure to check out this week's podcast episode all about map projections and how they distort our planet so that it doesn't even really look like our planet anymore. You can now watch full video versions of our podcast right here or on whatever app you use to listen to podcasts.
Oh.
All links are in the description below.
Lovely. New Netherlands or New York? What?
New York is one of the original 13 states of the United States. But despite this fact, the actual state itself has largely been forgotten in favor of the city it shares a name with. And this relationship between New York City and upstate New York has been locked in a tug of war ever since the days of the early colony. The land that is now New York was originally inhabited by various indigenous tribes, most notably the Iroquois Confederacy. This powerful alliance, consisting of the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora tribes, played a pivotal role in the region. The Iroquois were known for their sophisticated political system and social organization, as well as their skills in agriculture and craftsmanship. Their matrilineal society, where descent and inheritance were traced through the mother, was a fundamental aspect of their culture, contrasting sharply with the patriarchal norms of European settlers when they arrived in the early 1600s. In 1614, the Dutch, under the command of Hendrik Christiansen, built Fort Nassau, now Albany, the first Dutch settlement in North America.
I've heard of Albany before, so that's a start.
And the first European settlement in what would become New York State. The Dutch would go on to establish the city of New Amsterdam in 1624. Unfortunately for the Dutch, in 1664, the British would invade and take control of New Netherlands, renaming the colony New York.
Imagine they kept it as New Amsterdam. That would be so fascinating. If you've got Amsterdam, obviously, in Holland, and then you've got New Amsterdam in the US. God damn, the British had to ruin the name. Although New York, I mean, I guess Amsterdam is obviously in Holland, and then York's in England. So I guess they just thought, we're going to name it after one of our cities instead.
New Amsterdam would also be renamed to New York City. Fast forward 100 years to the American Revolutionary War, New York would play an integral role in the war. Even the Iroquois found themselves divided over the conflict, with the Mohawk, Seneca, Onondaga, and Cayuga remaining loyal to the British, and the Tuscarora and Oneida siding with the colonists. This division of the Iroquois,
conquer and divide, is that what's going on here? I guess they weren't really together anyway, but
led to devastating consequences for the Confederation, as post-war treaties and policies disregarded their sovereignty and led to the loss of their lands. During the 1800s, New York transformed into a bustling economic powerhouse for the United States. The construction of the Erie Canal in the 1820s was a landmark achievement, connecting the Great Lakes with the Atlantic Ocean and boosting trade and migration. It was during this time that New York City became known as the first truly global city, as millions of immigrants from Europe and Asia moved to the city. With that population migration came a boom in production, construction, housing, and economy, leading to New York City becoming the wealthiest city in the world. Today, New York State is a microcosm of America. It's dominated by New York City, and yet the city itself is only a small part of the entire state's geography. But before we explore the geography of New York State, if you're enjoying this video, hit that subscribe button. More fun geography videos are just a single click away.
See, in terms of New York State, like the geography there, I have no idea what it looks like. So, I mean, I'm actually quite fascinated to see this because, like you said at the start, I've not seen much of New York State. New York City is what I know about, so that's sort of how I view it, and I know that's not how it should be. So, here we go. For all you New York Staters, this is for you.
New York State, perhaps most often associated with the iconic skyline of New York City, offers a much more interesting and varied geography than that of its famous urban center. This diversity includes mountains, rivers, lakes, and forests, each contributing to the state's unique environmental and geological makeup.
That's beautiful.
The state can be broadly divided into several distinct regions. In the northeastern part of the state lies the Adirondack Mountains,
There's a mountain range in New York State. What? That's so fascinating. I didn't even know that.
Dome-shaped area that is part of the vast Canadian Shield. The Adirondacks are characterized by rugged terrain, with Mount Marcy standing as the highest point in New York at 5,343 feet. This area is also known for its dense forests, abundant wildlife, and numerous lakes and streams, making them a popular destination for outdoor recreation and a vital habitat for a wide variety of species. To the southeast of the Adirondacks is the Hudson Valley, a region that extends from the tip of Manhattan north to Albany. The Hudson River, which flows through this valley, is more than just a geographic feature. It's a vital waterway that has historically been crucial for trade and transportation. The valley is also known for its rich agricultural land, producing a variety of crops and serving as the backbone of many rural communities. Central New York is dominated by the Finger Lakes region, a series of narrow lakes formed by ancient glaciation. This region is renowned for its wine production thanks to the favorable microclimates created by these lakes.
Wine production? What the hell?
In fact, New York ranks third in grape production by volume after California and Washington. The Finger Lakes also contribute to the state's water resources, feeding into rivers and canals, including the historic Erie Canal. Further west lies the Great Lakes region, with New York bordering both Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. This area is crucial for its commercial and recreational opportunities. Niagara Falls, located at the border with Canada, is not only a breathtaking natural wonder, but also a significant source of hydroelectric power. Finally, despite not being thought of as a coastal state, New York does have a surprisingly long coastline due to Long Island, a large, densely populated island extending eastward from New York City. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, New York has approximately 2,625 miles of coast, more than New Jersey, Georgia, and even Oregon. But despite all this geography, New York's population has overwhelmingly amassed in New York City, leaving the rest of the state feeling pretty empty. New York State is home to 19.5 million people, making it the fourth largest state in the country behind only California, Texas, and Florida. But within the state itself, about 62% of the population lives within the New York City metropolitan area, leaving just 38% of the...
I mean, 38% of the people, that would be, what's it, 20 million altogether, let's just say. So there's about 7 million people living outside, 8 million people. So, I mean, it's still quite a lot of people. It's not like it's, like, no one at all. But I guess it could be more. But yeah, it's not that, like, nobody. This definitely isn't nobody. Still quite a lot of people living there.
State's population to live on 96% of all land. That's an incredible population distribution that's shared by few other places in the world. And, as usual, there are multiple geographic reasons for this. First, the climate differences between upstate New York and New York City are significant. Upstate New York experiences a more severe continental climate with colder winters and relatively mild summers compared to the coastal climate of New York City.
I assume
this isn't to say that New York City
That's sort of what I was thinking when I mentioned it. I didn't know how much different it would be, but...
doesn't get cold, but it's definitely more mild compared to, say, Buffalo, which experiences dreadful lake effect snow, which can subject the city to hazardous blizzards. This climatic variation has historically influenced settlement patterns, as the harsher climate in the north made it less attractive for early settlers and continues to be a deciding factor for people today.
What I'm fascinated by is how have they managed to make the pathway so clear, and then obviously all the stones around it. I don't know what sort of machinery they would use, but they've done a very good job. I mean, god damn, it's literally like, there's no snow on it at all. How the hell have they managed that? Give
But
them a
while climate has
raise.
played a role, historically, the establishment of the Dutch colony of New Amsterdam, which later became New York City, set the stage for the region's demographic development. As a port city, New Amsterdam quickly became a hub of commerce, trade, and immigration, drawing people from various parts of the world. Its strategic location, combined with its accessibility to Europe and other colonies, allowed it to grow rapidly in both wealth and population. In contrast, upstate New York was far more isolated during this period, with no natural ocean ports and a less favorable climate for agriculture and year-round living. Additionally, the presence and prominence of the Iroquois Confederacy in upstate New York played a crucial role in shaping these early settlement patterns. The Iroquois, a powerful and sophisticated alliance of tribes, controlled a large portion of what is now upstate New York. Their well-established and organized society, along with their military strength, initially acted as a deterrent to European settlement inland. The Iroquois were effective in maintaining their territory and autonomy for a significant period, which slowed the pace of colonial expansion into these areas. But perhaps more than all of this combined is the sheer economic power of New York City as a global financial center. During the 1800s and into the 1900s, the city grew exponentially. In fact, between 1890 and 1900, the city grew by more than 120%, growing from 1.5 million to 3.4 million people. In contrast, upstate New York, while rich in natural resources and agriculturally productive lands, did not experience the same level of immigration or industrial development. The rise of the Erie Canal did bring some growth to certain upstate cities, but this was relatively modest compared to the explosive growth of New York City. In more recent decades, economic factors have continued to influence demographic trends. New York City's diverse economy offers a wide range of job opportunities in finance, technology, media, and other industries, attracting a continuous influx of new residents. Upstate New York, while home to several universities, industries, and tourist attractions, has not seen the same level of economic growth and job creation, leading to a slower rate of population increase. Today, New York City is, by far, the largest city in the state, with about 8.8 million people in the city itself. Including the entire metro area, which includes parts of New Jersey and Pennsylvania, would increase this population.
Pennsylvania? What the? I didn't even know if it was in Pennsylvania. What the hell?
To 19.2 million people. This would be followed by Buffalo with 1.2 million, Rochester with 1.1 million, Albany with 900,000.
So when you see it like this, I don't know how. Well, let's just see land area, because when I'm looking at this, it looks like it's actually pretty well populated. New York State size compared to UK. There we go. Oh, so it is actually very big. New York State compared to England. Okay, when you see it like this, it does make it seem a bit crazier. Because I mean, I was sort of thinking New York, the state of New York, would be a bit smaller than this. So like, sort of seeing these sorts of, and obviously there's going to be smaller towns in between. Seeing these sorts of numbers was like not like thinking. I wasn't thinking, okay, this is very isolated or whatever. Like people, or there's obviously still a lot of people living in around this state. But then when you compare it to the UK, when you're gonna have London here, Birmingham here, Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Sheffield, Newcastle, all that will be, I assume, in this range or a lot bigger, like in the 900,000 people range or a lot bigger. So I mean, I guess that makes it, like, puts it into context a bit more. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's just the US in general, to be fair.
And Syracuse with 650,000 people. From there, metro area populations drop quickly. But one thing that's perhaps most interesting about upstate New York is that, unlike Canada, there are no major US cities along the St. Lawrence River, one of the largest rivers in all of North America. The absence of a major US city along the St. Lawrence River in New York State, despite its strategic location and significance as a waterway, is kind of odd, especially when you see that Montreal, home to 4.2 million Canadians, is located only about 63 miles downstream from the New York state line. Historically, the development of major cities has often been closely linked to trade and transportation. When European settlers arrived in North America, river access was crucial for these purposes. The St. Lawrence River, serving as a natural border between the United States and Canada, was a significant route for trade and movement. However, the political boundary it represented also played a role in hindering the development of a major American city along its banks. During the colonial era and the early years of the United States,
I'll be real, I didn't even know there was a river there. So that's the first time I've even found out that there's a river between Canada and the US in that area.
There was considerable tension and conflict between the US and British Canada. This tension made the St. Lawrence River a less attractive location for settlement and development compared to other areas that were more securely within US borders. Additionally, the harsh climate of the region, with its long, cold winters, made it less hospitable compared to other areas in the US. Another factor is the geographic competition the river has with the Great Lakes and the Erie Canal. The Great Lakes region and the Erie Canal, which was completed in 1825, became major hubs for trade and transportation. The Erie Canal, in particular, provided a more direct and economically viable route for goods to travel from the interior of the continent to the Atlantic coast via the Hudson River. This diverted potential development away from the St. Lawrence River towards New York City and other areas along the canal. And while the St. Lawrence River was significant for trade and transportation, due to Canada owning the mouth of the river at the Atlantic, there was little reason for the US to invest in it in the same way. Throughout history, the river has been a vital route for shipping and transportation, but this function was balanced with Canadian interests, which benefited most from the river's prominence. Today, there are some towns along the US side of the St. Lawrence River, such as Messina and Ogdensburg, but they haven't grown to the same scale of major US cities. And unless something drastic changes, there's little reason to believe they'll grow significantly in the future.
I wonder, right, is if you live in these cities, would you be more likely to just travel to somewhere like Montreal than to somewhere like New York, or even just the smaller cities like Syracuse or whatever the other cities are there? Because this is a lot closer. I assume a lot of people here will probably have like family on the other side. Because if you're this close to the border of another country, I assume you maybe have some sort of association to that other country. So I guess the question is, if you're from here, do you travel to Montreal or do you travel to New York? Because again, New York would literally be traveling like 500 miles to New York City, which would be crazy to just sort of go. I mean, I guess you would do it sometimes, but that's like me traveling to like Edinburgh. Yeah, like Edinburgh, a whole different country as well. And that's just flipping people from the same state traveling to another part of that state. So yeah, I guess you probably would go to Montreal as a major city instead of somewhere like New York, which I assume maybe some people do. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows?
I believe they'll grow significantly in the future. New York State is big in both size and...
Upstate isn't empty. It's just that New York City, yeah, it definitely isn't empty. It's still an interesting video. I don't get me wrong. I find it fascinating, but you got to get your titles for YouTube, right? So I understand it. Got stationed at Fort Drum in 2022, and the area is by far my most favorite place to have lived within the US. I live in upstate New York. It's far from empty. We choose not to live on top of each other. Why anyone would choose to live in such tight conditions as New York City is completely beyond me. In terms of like the cost to live in New York State, is it a whole load cheaper, or do you still have to pay somewhat higher than the average sort of person would have to pay in, let's just say, Massachusetts, because just the state that you're in, maybe it's just a more financially, like a state that's doing a lot financially better than other places. I don't know. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this. Hopefully you enjoyed, and until next time, subscribe and peace.